Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about why I'm not very excited for Season 4. I'm normally very positive on this channel overall because, well, except for during like the darkest times of Shadowlands, because I've generally enjoyed the game other than that, since making this channel. But occasionally there's something I'm a little bit negative on, but this isn't really negativity as much as it is indifference. Now I do want to make this video because I'm not going to be putting out a bunch of season 4 Ret Paladin, season 4 this or that, because frankly I can't get myself excited for it. Of course I'll do something like, these are the best trinkets for the raid, this is the best trinkets for Mythic Plus, because you'll have an opportunity to get whatever trinkets you want from the raid and stuff with your dinars and all that kind of stuff, and upgrade your stuff and whatnot, assuming it works the same way as it did in Shadowlands. So like it's probably worth doing that and knowing that, but it's like not worth really diving deep into, in my opinion. Plus, like we're going to be using like the same tier set, and there's nothing really super new or interesting for Ret Paladins, unless something they get updated in some way. Also, the War Within stuff's going to be coming out soon, and even if I don't have the alpha myself, I'm still going to be consuming that and talking about that as well. So that's just part of the reason why I'm not excited about it. I think this kind of deserves a deep dive talk in some ways, more than just like a 1 minute I just don't like it, because in Shadowlands I actually felt very differently. In Shadowlands we had the Fated season. Now Shadowlands was, of course, most people would view as a bad expansion, and towards the end of it got much better. Like basically when they saw how bad the player numbers were and decided, okay, we should probably start listening, the game got better, first of all, and players were more welcoming to it, and so they carried that into Dragonflight and everything like that. But the Fated season was kind of like that. So basically they're like, hey, a few devs were like, hey, we gave them kind of we should do something for the players, basically, is how I've heard that they've kind of pitched it. Like, we should do something for the players. Let's try to put together a season where we just reuse the content, because we can't have our artists trying to crunch and make content or something like that. That's not how it works. We'll reuse the raids, but we'll add affixes to them, and we'll do a new affix for the dungeons that is a helping affix instead of a hurting affix, and we'll just try to make it fun and cool. Now the raid, in my opinion, still wasn't that good. I felt like the affixes in the raid were too punishing for fights, especially when you get to fights that are already punishing. Like this like extra season probably shouldn't be like extra hard or whatever. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Of course they were like the nerfed versions of the bosses, but then even the nerfed version of like a really hard boss with a really bad affix on it, makes it kind of uber hard or whatever. And so I was fine with the Shadowlands stuff, basically, because it was like an homage to the players. It was like, hey, it was like and they have admitted it, but it was like admitting that they screwed up in Shadowlands, and like, hey, we're gonna do this for you guys, so you don't have to sit there bored and do nothing until the next expansion comes out. With Dragonflight, though, now there is a reason for it still, but with Dragonflight it feels like, hey, we were gonna have downtime this expansion, so we're just doing this crap again, and we're putting even less effort into it. Now that's not completely fair, because with the changes to dungeons, so if you don't know, they're doing a bunch of changes to how dungeons work. Heroic dungeons are going to matter somewhat, unless if you're like a top 1% player, pretty much nothing has changed for you. But if you're anywhere in the middle, there's a lot of changes to the dungeons and the way they work. And so I get that they want to like even test that out and stuff like that. And to be fair, the Mythic Plus season might be fine. It might even be cool. You'll get to do the first 4 Dragonflight dungeons without the Thundering affix and see if that feels a lot better. I imagine it probably will. So, the Mythic Plus season might be fine. So I am kind of more jaded towards the raiding side of it. The raid basically is nothing. It's like, hey, do these raids again. We up the difficulty on the do the same exact raids again. And that's just kind of boring to me. And it's honestly, it's just not that fun. That's the only way I can really put it. It's just not that fun to go back and just do the same raids again with the difficulty turned up. Now, here's why I am understanding of it. So I said I'm more like indifferent instead of negative, and here's why, right? Because so far I've probably seemed pretty negative, but I'm more indifferent because the reality is this is going to be the last time that this happens, at least in the next foreseeable future. So the next 3 expansions are basically set on like an 18-month timeline, and they kind of feed into each other. It's like one big expansion. It's a 3-part storyline, right? Like a movie or something, like a movie with 3, like Lord of the Rings or something, right? And so each expansion is going to feed into each other. They're going to be 18 months. I totally believe they're going to do that. The only and the downside of this would be if the content suffers because they're trying to push it out. But this is kind of the schedule that they do content on already. The reason why it usually bleeds into 2 years eventually is because holidays, things like that, real life things, they take time off, whatever, and then we normally have some sort of downtime between the next expansion launch. Also, they want to launch the expansion usually in Q4. This time they're launching in Q3, but that stuff matters as well. So like they don't want to launch expansion usually in like Q2 or something, and so you end up waiting longer so they can release it at the proper time or whatever. And so that's kind of like the reason why you see the expansions launched around the same time usually, for whatever reason. So, or for that reason, not whatever reason. And so with these 18-month expansions, it's going to be basically you get the raid 6 months later, you get the second raid 6 months later, you get the third raid 6 months later, you get the new expansion. So it's going to be point three or three seasons into an expansion instead of 3 seasons into a faded season or an awakened season or whatever. And again, that's all fine as long as the quality doesn't suffer. I think that's all great and fine. Yes, they are going to make a little bit extra money because of having the expansions come out. Like they'll technically make more money over the course of those, however many years they'll make more money because of that. I'm not too worried about that part as long as the raids are fine, because we won't have to deal with this at least, right? This kind of weird season where in this case for raiders, you don't really get any benefit whatsoever to it. It is kind of like there's nothing to do in many ways. I probably will, my guild will probably do at least heroic raid because it'll be easy for us. And, I'll probably do some Mythic Plus as well for sure. But, I don't know how much of the Mythic raid we're going to even try to do, which is kind of why at least me and my guild play the game is to do the Mythic raid. And so, it's just, that's kind of why I'm indifferent, because I completely understand this is a problem that's going to be going away. But it still doesn't make it like fun for me, right? I'm not going to be positive about it because there's nothing fun for me to do, essentially in it. And so, yeah, I wanted to talk about that a little bit, give my perspective on it. Also talk about why I'm not going to be like, why I haven't already like done like, oh, Ret Paladin season 4, because, again, I have absolutely no hype for it whatsoever. Anything I do will probably be Mythic Plus related, like video wise, because we've already done all the raids essentially. Maybe I could do some tips for the raids since I've already done them all. Then I could maybe talk about some of the bosses and some tips to do on them. That's an interesting thought for people who do want to participate in this season 4. But yeah, ultimately for anybody else who's disgruntled about it or like negative about it, like at least this isn't going to happen again anytime in the next 3 expansions. Unless something terrible happens, something goes very, very wrong. We won't have to worry about this ever again, but it doesn't make these next however many months feel better. So April 23rd, May, June, July, August doesn't make the next 4 or 5 months feel better. It just feels like, in my opinion, they should have let this season just continue on so more people can kill Farak and get cutting edge or whatever than to do this. I don't know. At least for the raid, go ahead and release the new PvP season, release the new Mythic Plus season. I think that's fine and that's great. They're also, like I said, testing out the new dungeon changes, so like that part would be fine. But this just feels contrived at this point, and I'm glad. Hopefully, we'll never have to really deal with this again because it's just not interesting. I was really let down. Any negativity I have is let down that they aren't really experimenting anything in raid per se. Like the affix thing was interesting. I didn't necessarily like it, but it was interesting. It would be kind of cool if there was like a buff affix or something and that helped you complete the raids or whatever. And people were just like, the way I view it, right? And this will be my final point. The way I view this faded season or this awakened season is that what it should be is just something to do with your guild, with your pals, whatever. Just like Mythic Plus, everything else. And like the difficulty should actually be toned down to where, because first of all, there's no race to world first. Nobody cares about this that much. This should just be like, hey, we're just raiding. You know, as long as we focus, as long as we play well, we're gonna kill the bosses. We're not gonna wipe more than like 10 times. Maybe on like the final boss, we wipe like 20 times or 30 times or something like that while we do it. You know, something like that, right? To where it's not that much of bashing your head on the wall. But if it's anything like the Fated season from Shadowlands, they're going to turn up the slider the appropriate amount for an expansion, and it's going to be, you know, obviously the fights are already figured out, so that helps a lot, and people already kind of know the fights if they've already done them previously in the expansion. But again, nobody wants to bash so instead of 400 pulls for Tindril, it's 200 pulls for Tindril. Nobody wants to do that. I'm sorry, that's just the case. Nobody wants to do that. So yeah, that's it for this one. Just wanted to explain my point of view there. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel. Helps me out a lot. And other than that, everybody have a good one.